The new Bart Layton film Crime 101 is set somewhere in the Marvel multiverse. No longer wanting to be a joke to Taika Waititi, Thor becomes a thief and teams up with Storm, who's tired of being directed by creeps the likes of Bryan Singer and Brett Ratner, and so decided to become an insurance broker. Together they team up to execute $1 million heist. Little do they know that Bruce Banner got tired of all the Professor Hulk bullshit the Russo brothers tried to pull in Endgame, so he decided to become a detective and pursue the two across LA. Now, the Marvel part might just be fan canon, but everything else I said about this movie is true. Except instead of being indebted to Marvel movies, this is indebted to the classic adult crime thrillers of the 70s and 80s, the likes of The Long Goodbye and The French Connection. Really though, why waste my time with those two movies when we can talk about the one 1995 film that this movie is far more indebted to, Michael Mann's Heat. Now, if you're someone who thinks that's a lazy comparison, or that Heat is the greatest crime film ever made and there's no chance this even holds a candle, think again. Hey, if you're gonna complain about anything, it should be that this movie is far too indebted to Heat. Bart Layton is far from the first director to be inspired by Michael Mann's Heat. Look no further than Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight for the most prominent example. But this movie right here is by far the most blatant, most shameless one yet. Beyond the aesthetics of the film, you've got yourself a detective and a criminal who rarely interact across the film but who mirror each other in the fact they both need to get a life, and a criminal who lives in loneliness and is in desperate need of getting laid, who gets into a romance that just might pull him out of his life of degeneracy. If the 88% Rotten Tomatoes score is anything to go by, it's that this formula worked for most people, and I hear a lot of the same sentiments being echoed about this film. They don't make them like this anymore. But for me, scarcity does not equal quality, and the fact that movies like 101 aren't put in theaters much doesn't make them any better. It doesn't change the fact that ultimately this is a movie that has been done many times before and in the hands of way better directors, with Heat as the most prominent example. That results in a movie that is, for better or worse, very dependable. This movie follows a blueprint that has been laid out by previous superior action crime films, and in following in the footsteps of those, director Bart Layton has made it incredibly hard to fail. The flip side is that in following those films so faithfully, Crime 101 fails to carve out a unique identity for itself. If you take a film like Longlegs, there's definitely a lot of Seven influence there, but no one out there is silly enough to suggest that movie has to be just as good as David Fincher's original film, or even close. Why that is, I think it's because that film borrows from other movies like Silence of the Lambs, and you end up with something that stands on its own, so there's no need to make a one-to-one comparison between the two films, since they're each trying to accomplish somewhat different goals. Yeah, we all know Seven is way better, but there's no need to really say it. But since Crime 101 is so indebted to the Michael Mann 1995 crime film, it's disingenuous to call this anything other than Heat but worse. It would be like reviewing a Heat remake without comparing it to the original film. I mean, that just wouldn't make any sense. If you're not familiar with Heat and the similarities aren't overbearing, you'll probably have a decent time with this movie. Without any reference point, you can really enjoy the performances here. You can enjoy the fact that the great Halle Berry has been given a juicy role worthy of her talent in what feels like a long time. As an Aussie, there's something so distinctly Australian about Chris Hemsworth, but once I was willing to make peace with this unconvincing accent, there's a tenderness to his performance that I truly didn't know he had in him. But even putting aside the Heat comparisons, there's problems here, problems that would stand even if Michael Mann had never directed that movie, and this movie somehow still still existed. One of those problems is the atrocious use of actress Monica Barbaro. Considering her show-stealing, award-nominated turn in A Complete Unknown, it genuinely feels a little insulting to cast her in the role of the two-dimensional love interest. Even in a smaller role like Top Gun Maverick, she was able to bring a certain swagger, but none of the charisma she's capable of is here. And it results in one of the blandest, most poorly written romances I've seen on screen in a long time. But the fatal problem here is one word, and that's pacing. This movie is agonizingly slow, and it never finds a way to effectively balance its high-octane set pieces with its slower character moments. In fact, the fact I see those two as two distinct halves instead of different parts that make up a whole is a part of the problem. When you're sitting in the theater and watching Chris Hemsworth and Monica Barbaro have the chemistry of two siblings, you're left asking yourself, where is this going? A lot of the times, the movie itself doesn't seem to have the answer, and the heist I mentioned at the beginning of this review often feels like an afterthought, with Hemsworth and Barry not crossing paths until about the halfway mark of the movie. When the film does reach its conclusion, it's great. Watching this movie feels a lot like seeing a plane landing. It's a rough landing, but the plane lands, and when it does, it's great. And for that alone, you leave the theater feeling pretty good about the movie. I'm at that age where I grew up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so there's something satisfying about seeing Thor and Hulk come to a head. But it's hard for me to recommend this movie to anyone who isn't an absolute crime obsessive. And for that, Crime 101 gets a 600 out of 10. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for weekly movie and TV reviews. And if you've had the chance to watch Crime 101, hop in the comments and let us know what you thought about it. I'm Cinemike, and I'll see you next time.